Well, welcome to NewsQuest Investigates podcast. A very sad day. I woke up this morning to the news of Paul O'Grady having died. It's a very sad day because he was an incredible individual. He was a guy that I'd met on a number of occasions. I chatted with him. Actually, I sat on the same table as him at a BAFTA Awards. And he had a real heart. He had a heart of gold, not just in relation to the dogs and the animals that we all know about, an ambassador for Battersea Dogs and Cats Home, but also for children. He was a former social worker. He worked with children, or a care worker actually, with children, and he had a passion for other people. He centered his life around looking after other people, and he always had time to sit and talk to you. No matter how busy he was, and he was an incredibly busy man, he always had time to sit and talk to you and chat about his life, and was always interested in what you had to say. So my thoughts are with him. A tragic, tragic loss of a brilliant, brilliant star. Well, let's move on now to today's podcast. A fascinating discussion, a discussion that will make you think hard about the information we hear when it's put into the public domain, and particularly when it appears on social media, and will make you think about whether or not sometimes the reaction that people have to things can backfire, can go seriously wrong when perhaps you don't have the full story, or the information you're being given is perhaps not the correct information. Perhaps somebody else has an agenda. So as we start to go through today's podcast, you're going to have two guests, and I'm going to introduce them very shortly. But I would love to hear from you. So please, as we start, do use the hashtag #AskMark. Ask me any questions. We can put it to one of the two guests, or I can answer the question myself. I really want you to get involved. So this is the story of 22-year-old Eleanor Williams, who's recently been jailed. This all came to light in relation to a Facebook post that she made. She's now been sentenced to 8.5 years for making false claims that she had been beaten, raped, abused, and trafficked by men. She posted pictures of her injuries on social media, which were self-inflicted by her using a hammer, her own hammer. And as you can see from this CCTV footage of her buying the hammer. Those footage courtesy of Cumbria Police. Incredible, really, to think that that hammer that she bought is something that she then used to inflict pretty serious injuries on herself that resulted in her making false allegations, total fantasies, false allegations that she had suffered very severe injuries. Well, she was found out. She went to court, and in sentencing, the judge's comments were damning, really damning. For over an hour, he highlighted some real key areas. Let's listen to him talking about the lies that she spoke.
This was a detailed account of the most serious sort of sexual trafficking. This was, she said, first orchestrated by Mr. Ramzan, but then others became involved. It had been going on, she said, for years. She provided lists of girls who had been trafficked. None of them had been trafficked. She supplied a long list of men who were traffickers. They were not.
It all began on Facebook, social media, just after 2 p.m. on May 2020. The team at the Mail in South Cumbria were just as shocked and appalled as everyone else who saw her 1,300-word post. Williams described facing years of abuse at the hands of Asian grooming gang operating in Barrow and further afield. The Mail set about reporting on the horrific story of abuse and trafficking, a failing of the authorities to spot what was happening right under their very noses. But over the following days, it would become clear that potentially there was more to her claims. Innocent men such as Mohammed Ramzan, the Barrow businessman and entrepreneur, started to receive abuse and death threats in person and on social media. In the days after the post, Cumbria Police confirmed one person had been charged. That later turned out to be Williams. But the Cumbria Mail coverage led them to come under severe fire. Hundreds of abusive messages began to flood in on their Facebook page, and it saw a concerted effort by the community to undermine them. A bid, they say, that the Mail had gone to silence Williams. The uncomfortable truth, they said, that the Mail was hiding, preventing them from exposing paedophiles in the community. Some local shops and businesses decided that they would no longer stock the Mail, and there became a growing campaign online to boycott the newspaper. There were threats against the reporters, threats that they had to live with on a day-to-day basis. Let's listen to the judge's view on the impact of on the community by this allegation by Williams.
According to the statement of Superintendent Pearman, the period following the Facebook post on the 20th of May 2020 was turbulent in Barrow. He says that Barrow had not seen such a public display of anger for 30 years. There were public demonstrations targeting the local paper, the local Asian community, and the police. The comments attracted by the defendant's post named local businesses who feared they'd be subject to attack. One restaurant had its windows smashed. Police resources were diverted to dealing with the threat. Death threats were made against local restaurant owners. Marches were organised to protest about a suspected police cover-up. The fire service installed smoke alarms at vulnerable premises. Local journalists were the subject of credible threats. One left her home and moved out of the area. Racist anti-police graffiti was sprayed on a wall in Barrow. Threats were made on social media against the police. A demonstration convoy of cars drove from Barrow to Ulverston and back again on the 25th of May. The police were under pressure from those who believed they were complicit in a cover-up on the one hand, and those who felt unsafe at the hands of apparent vigilantes on the other.
I'm going to play you a clip in a minute of the police who talked about the lack of trust now that has come as a result of that. Police confidence is at an all-time low. Every day we see articles appearing in the newspaper where the trust has been lost, whether that be officers being prosecuted or failing to do their job. We have to have confidence in the police, and the police have the public to trust them, because if that doesn't happen, then law and order breaks down. And it's really important that we trust the police to do their job. But of course, what this did with Williams was to divide a community, those people who felt that Williams's allegations were true, were not listened to. That's why the Mail suffered such torrent of abuse, because people were saying, well, you're not believing her. You know, this is you covering up in the same way as the police are covering up. Of course, that wasn't true. Let's hear from the police as they talk about how difficult it will now be to build that trust back up.
Whilst the constabulary has dealt with a number of complex investigations, I have never seen anything of the magnitude and impact that this case had and far-reaching consequences, the catalyst of which was a singular social media post, amongst other aspects. This is something that we continue to attempt to recover from in terms of building community reassurance and confidence, and that trust in our capability as an organisation to tackle these issues, based on the fact that there was no foundation to the claims of Eleanor Williams.
So what's the story behind the headlines? Dan Taylor is a reporter at the Mail in South Cumbria and has covered the story from the very beginning. Also joining me very shortly will be a man who's had his life ripped apart by these false allegations. Mohammed Ramzan was falsely accused by Williams of rape and trafficking. Such was the torment he had to face. He tried to kill himself 2 weeks after being arrested. Let's listen to Mohammed's statement outside court.
There's no winners here today. I feel no sense of triumph, only sadness for the loss of the years, the impact on my family, here we are, and the true impact that this will have on true victims. That's the loss here of slavery and sexual abuse. As a father and an uncle to my amazing girls, this fills me with profound sadness. Word profound, there's profound sadness this is. only the love and unwavering support from my family enabled me to endure this nightmare. They gave me the strength I needed, because didn't need a lot of strength. These are the people that you're in and the family to carry on, for which I'm truly thankful. Because there was a fight, So I'm not sure how my family and I are going to recover from this. The mud sticks, and I fear it may take some time. But as a family, we remain strong, and we will be strong. And we're determined to move forward positively with our lives. And we won't be leaving Barrow. We will be still remaining in Barrow friends, because that's what I want.
Gosh, what a shocking and very heartfelt, emotional statement there by Mohammed. We'll hear from him very shortly. But before that, let's hear from Dan. Dan was a local reporter who covered the story right from the very beginning and has been used by all the main news outlets because he's a trusted source. Although that wasn't how the public and the community saw him right at the very beginning. Dan, thank you for joining me. Let's go back to that Facebook post in May 2020 and tell me what your initial reaction was.
I mean, yeah, it was an extremely long and detailed Facebook post. You know, there were these horrendous images that she'd shared of, you know, she had a black eye that she could barely open. There were these horrible bruises all over her body. You can see it there. You know, it was an extremely shocking post, and you know, I think just like everyone else, you know, it was just horrendous to see, and people were wondering, you know, just what has gone on here, and how has it happened without anyone seemingly knowing about it.
And what was your reaction to that as a paper, Dan? What did you start to do?
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, something like that is extremely rare for it to happen, I suppose, anywhere, especially in Barrow. So, you know, we saw it and we set about reporting on it. I think it was sort of shortly after 2 p.m. that day when she'd posted it, and then so the next few hours we were sort of, you know, putting this to police, saying, what can you say about this? And I think, you know, later that day they sort of came out with, we're aware of this post, we've been investigating already.
And where does it go from there? Because it was in a matter of days, they then tell you that there has been someone charged. But at that point, you didn't know who that was, did you?
Yeah, I mean, not slightly controversially, very controversially. I think it was the 2 days after the original post, we had a video statement released by, you know, one of the most senior officers at Cumbria Police saying, you know, sort of addressing the claims in this post. And he sort of said, there's a grooming gang being alleged here, but we want to tell people that is not the case at all. And then he revealed at the end of that statement that someone had in fact been charged in relation to the post. And obviously, you know, in the coming days, it would become obvious that it wasn't, you know, anyone that was involved in a grooming gang. It was Williams herself.
So you have an initial story that she posts online that attracts quite a lot of attention. The police within days notify you that someone has been charged. You didn't know who that was. They then come out in days later and say that there is no grooming gang. But that wasn't the end of it, was it? You know, that the impact on the communities, they ran with that initial story. And what started to happen to your community, to you and to your fellow reporters?
Yeah, I mean, you know, just as you heard from the judge then, it was an extremely turbulent time in Barrow, very tense. So, you know, people were starting to think that there was some kind of cover-up, the fact that it had not been reported or supposedly investigated by the police. So, you know, people were sort of looking towards the paper and thinking, why have you reported on her being charged? Why have you not, why are we not aware of this already? So people sort of thought that we were involved in some kind of conspiracy. So what happened then?
You were working with the police, basically. You were covering up this story with the police.
Exactly. Yeah, people thought there was some sort of grand cover-up to silence Williams, and obviously out of that came this sort of torrent of abuse towards us. Our Facebook inbox was sort of flooded with messages like people saying, "Why are you protecting paedophiles?" basically.
And was that quite a sense of overwhelming? Have you been in a scenario where you'd had such a backlash from people on a story you'd done before?
No, I mean, obviously, you work for a newspaper. You're used to, the
Not everyone likes what you write, do they?
Yeah, the rough and tumble of, when you report something that's maybe slightly controversial. But yeah, nothing at all like this ever.
And where did the threats directly come? I mean, did you get direct threats from people? Did the paper get direct threats?
Yeah, there were all sorts of things sent to us, mainly on social media with, just abuse. But then, there were sort of threats of, maybe not necessarily overt threats of violence, but, trying to sort of suggest things, trying to sort of suggest that we needed to keep an eye out.
And did you or did your other colleagues fear any violence or, any issues in relation to the people that were getting very angry?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, there were definitely specific threats towards my colleague Amy at the time, and police did advise her to leave her home, so she did have to leave the area at the time.
Astonishing, really. And this was because you were covering this story, but the story started to take on its own legs, didn't it? Because other people started to be arrested as well. So how did that come about? How did people end up getting arrested when they were in a position that they had charged her? So just give me a timeline of what was happening.
Yeah, I mean, so after she'd been charged, there was already anger and outrage about this post from when people saw it. But after she'd been charged, that was when it sort of really ratcheted up more. And out of that came people smashing windows and things like that. And I think we've heard from the police now there was this huge threefold increase in hate crime. There was something like 151 extra crimes recorded that year, as a result of that post, basically. So there was all sorts of things happening, and obviously we had Tommy Robinson come up to do his own investigations, is what he said, and he ended up himself getting arrested for an alleged assault that was later dropped by the police.
Let's have a look at them. I don't think they've got any sound, are they? But we've got some shots of Tony Robinson in the area. This is him. Just talk through what Tony Robinson was up. Why was he up there? Why did he go there?
Yeah, I mean, there were these claims going around of some large scale grooming gang, and he said that he'd come up to investigate. Obviously during the pandemic, you weren't really allowed to travel, but he came to Barrow and he was filmed having a bit of a scuffle with police outside the town, and he was sort of claiming he was a journalist. He was allowed to come in, so he came in, and you can see it there. He came in and he was attending these protests that were held. It's just sort of talking to people, doing a bit of filming.
So his position was he was supporting Williams in the fact that she was making a report that there were Asian gangs involved in the grooming of children, which of course we do know do take place. He was basically coming up there to add his voice against them. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can imagine that he has his agenda, and people say that he's got his own agenda. But all we really knew publicly from him was that he'd come up to investigate. But from all sides, really, from even Ellie Williams' family, no one really wanted him to be there, because it increased the tension in the town. Really, it really wasn't welcome.
So let's go back to the beginning. So we have this post by Williams in May 2020. And then how soon after that were people starting to be arrested? Because there wasn't just Mohammed, there were other people that's impacted on.
Yeah, I mean, so she said she'd put this post out, and on the 20th of May 2020. But what people didn't know is that for about a year, police had already been investigating her. She'd already been charged with multiple counts of perverting the course of justice. So I think there were about there were 5 named men eventually on the indictment against her, who were basically taken into police custody as a result of claims made against them. Claims which we now know were a complete fabrication, basically. So all these people were drawn into this story that she'd put forward.
So she'd made allegation a year previously, gone to the police. Police were investigating it. It was only when she made the matter public that, of course, the public and yourselves knew that there'd been an ongoing investigation. And then shortly after that, she gets charged. but the damage has already been done over that year period where people were targeted, where people were arrested in relation to the allegations that she made.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you know, she made these allegations against people. So, you know, there were arrests and, you know, within the community, people knew about that. So they'd obviously face, you know, threats and, you know, the humiliation of being arrested and things like that. But obviously, you know, that would have gone up an order of magnitude when, you know, it then becomes, you know, Williams then goes public with her story and, you know, everyone knows about it then. So that just increases even more.
Now, there was a huge targeting of the Asian community because, of course, she made allegations that it was the Asian community involved in the grooming process. That was a huge issue for the police to deal with. And indeed, you've alluded to the increase in hate crime. Let's just listen to the police's interview when they talk about the targeting of Asian businesses.
So initially when they were published there was outrage, and I understand why that would be the case because the pictures were shocking. Unfortunately it led to people wrongly and without any foundation targeting elements of the Asian community, and also it led to the community not understanding the response that the police had in respect of that. So there was Facebook campaigns set up with well over 100,000 people subscribing to it, so it was a really large audience. We saw people drawn into Barrow to support the campaigns that were being raised. We saw protests in the community, and unfortunately we saw members of the Asian community being targeted. Some had to leave the area, their businesses were damaged, property damaged, vandalised, all in respect of those Facebook posts.
A huge impact on the community. So it's probably about the right time now. Let's bring in Mohammed. Is he here? I know there was a slight delay. You get brilliant. Thank you. So Mohammed, Mr. Ramzan, thank you so much for joining us. I am shocked and saddened. I'm shocked and saddened with what you've had to go through. And of course, nobody should have to go through what you have been through. How are you feeling?
Well, today, after the whole ordeal, since the sentencing, we feel like we've got some of our life back. And it's a day, to be honest with you. You get good days, bad days, and it's just, you just carry on. And at the moment, I'm starving because it's Ramadan, I'm fasting.
Well, you do incredibly well. I tell you what, I don't think I could fast. I struggle not to eat a meal at lunchtime and when I'm even trying to lose a bit of weight. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to the first time that you were aware that an allegation had been made against you. Just talk me through that, Mohammed.
Well, the allegation directly has been, it's been like, I got arrested in the 2019. I was subject to all this abuse a lot going back to 2016, 2017. So I was in the midst of the local area. I was classed as an enabler, a paedophile sympathizer, a paedophile protector, a kingpin, organizer of sex parties. But that was just on a local level, on a few different businesses, a few different people. Let it go. You just thought it's local idiots and carry on with your life. And you carry on. Till 2019, 7/7, that's when my life turned.
Why were
I
you
got
getting
arrested
it?
and I got basically accused.
Why were you
Well,
getting the grief in 2016, 17? Why was that? Just a community that was being ignorant?
There's two. When I look at this, and I speak to this about even today, I'm still speaking to the police about the issues from then today. And I talk about it. Firstly, it was a change in my business from restaurants, takeaways. I came into the ice cream van world. So from as soon as I bought my ice cream van, I became a target. I have never had any trouble with Barrow Police. Prior to that, I've been here 12 years now. In 2016 to 2017, over 18 stops I had, and I was always on the ice cream vans for drug searches. So we started
Right.
off as a drug dealer. Obviously, there was plenty of police searches, police requests done. There was nothing. Then it became a paedophile. He's got an ice cream van because this is how he gets young girls.
And this was the public thinking this, or did you think this was an attitude perception within the police?
There's certain officers within the police that actually thought, yes, it was like a nutter. She came gunning for us. She took me out off all the platforms, all the online platforms I was doing. She even came to my business because my partner used to have a Christmas shop, and we used to hold annual Santa's Grotto. They closed that down. When we were told we're not allowed to do that, we were told we weren't. They got me off the platform on online delivery. I thought that I got back with that, but that was taking place. Me and my partner made the decision of not to do the grotto. We still got the Christmas shop, but we just thought we're not going to do the grotto this year because it caused us too much problem. But it was partially local police and the local idiots, I'd say. And there were a couple of families that were gunning for men, which there's plenty of on social media. You can see I put it up there. And they came to a house. They punched my nephew that passed away last year. They caused absolute havoc for me. They've driven from me once. I drove out of Farm Foods. Basically, just followed me, shouting out unlicensed driver, cameraman, called me all sorts of slurs, all the way to the bottom of my street. So now imagine me followed for a mile, half a mile, 3/4 of a mile from Farm Foods Towers. Somebody filming you and just shouting slurs at you. And the police didn't do anything. This time and time again, I can see failures.
This is really interesting because Nazir Afzal is a very good friend of mine, and I'm sure you know of Nazir. And I've talked to Nazir a lot about the status of police and how that they, the racist element and the stopping of people. And of course, it's been very widely circulated in the press around that. And it's absolutely true. There are certain elements of the community who get picked on, and you are. You're tantamount to that. Your testimony is absolutely that. So you're going through a barrage of targeting for many years before this then lands on your doorstep.
Yeah. And this is the frustration with local police. Barrow Police Station was aware of everything. They had Jordan Trentgrove in custody, and that was taken through Barrow Police Station. This is where I say Barrow Police tried to keep the doorstep clean by not accepting my custody. When I got arrested, they refused my custody. Even though it was a local police station, they wouldn't have me there. They had me sent to Kendal.
Okay, let's explore that. So talk me through the moment of your arrest. I want you to tell me exactly what you're feeling, that moment the police come into your house and arrest you.
Well, I got arrested on the promenade. I got arrested on the main road. As I left here to go. See, this is the other idea where I say, the rival business. They had never, for 2 years, we've been neck and neck. They give me a job to help them on this day, on this specific day. They phoned up 2 days earlier. Can you help us? We need a job doing on this date. And I was like,
so it was organized.
It's a coincidence. It could be a coincidence. So I've gone to go and get some extra stock from Booker's. I'm driving out. I'm doing 50 miles an hour on a 30-mile zone. And the officer doesn't stop me for that. And just stops me to say my number did. And I didn't get prosecuted for overspeeding. And they didn't, and it was just the whole ordeal. And basically, they're having me arrested on the promenade. And so many officers just turning out with a faded number plate. And when they arrested me, and him knowing my name, already, Mo Mohammed, is it Mo Mohammed? The way his head was going at the door like this, and Mo Mohammed. I went, yeah, Mohammed Ramzan, took my license out, give it him. He turned the car off as I got out of the car. And just as soon as they cuffed me, we're arresting you. Like, what for? Human trafficking and modern day slavery. And I laughed. My response at the time, I thought, oh my God, is this what it is? To me, I've been given this job by him at this date to see if I'm paying the full wages or my staff's on the books. That's what I triggered originally.
Right.
But obviously, little I knew when I get to the police station. Well, eventually, when I did get to the police station, it did take a while for me to get to the police station. They had me stood on the street, handcuffed for about 10 minutes, between 7 to 10 minutes. People driving by, taking photos of me. Then I had to ask, can you please put me in a car? 4 or 5 of them searching my car. Nicola, my wife, she had done a bit of a spring clean. Some of the boys' old clothes, mine, hers, and I was going to go and throw them in the recycling bin on the way. Just went through the bags, opening the bags like they were going to find something in there. Just going through everything on the promenade, so humiliated. And I was just like, can you not please sit me in my car or sit me in a van or something? Why am I stood here to open to public humiliation? What seems to be the matter?
So you go to the police station, you're interviewed at the police station. Do you have a solicitor?
Well, at first I thought it's nothing. But when I got to the sergeant, I did request for a solicitor. When I got, and they told me all the details of how harrowing the charges would be if I were to get charged. And when I got a duty solicitor, they give like a disclosure to them so that we can discuss it. And before we go, on that piece of paper, there was about 3 sentences.
And what did it say?
So it was very vague. It was about trafficking, exploitation, grooming gangs, industry, this grooming gang industry, organising of sex parties. And I just looked at the solicitor and I just thought, you know what? I said, I'm not sitting here with you. I just thought to myself, it's pointless sitting here discussing with a solicitor because it's bullshit. Sorry, pardon me language there. I'm not wasting my time sat here with you. I said, I want to sit here with the officers. And he just looked at me and go, you're innocent. I went, yeah, can you tell? He goes, yeah, I can tell. I said, I went a bit of a joke. And I said, get me the interview. So I went to the interview. The interview was a harrowing ordeal. I've never been subject to something so demoralizing. You're dehumanizing. It's, when you're a father, you're an uncle. It's upsetting. It still upsets me to the day that I have had to sit there and listen to that, and then to be able to actually make them allegations or the line of questioning. So it still upsets me. It still upsets me to today.
And did you come away when you walked away from that interview? Did you think, what on earth is going on? Where has this all come from?
Yeah, I did. Hell yeah, I did.
And were you able to fill that in?
Huh?
Were you able to give any answer? I mean, did you know Ellie Williams? Did they tell you that it related to her?
I did do on my release. Of course I didn't know Ellie Williams. I had no idea who she was. And they showed me a picture of her. I had 2 interviews, one very lengthy interview, very disturbing. And the second one, not as long, but it was still an interview. And they showed me a picture of her. No, come home on the 9th, children. I've obviously been in for almost 2 days. My children went on social media. We found out who she was. The picture that was on social media as a profile was a picture the police showed me.
Right.
So when my wife's seen it, and she goes, "Oh my God, Rami, you know who that is?" I was like, "No." She goes, "It's Alison's daughter." I went, "You are? Our Emma's sister's daughter? I'm Burns' granddaughter?" She goes, "Yeah." And I just thought, this doesn't make sense at all. So I just picked up the phone, and which I have because I was on bail conditions. I rang Anne Burns. And she's the head of children's services. She's the county councillor, and she's a grandmother, and she's been in the town hall for about 30 odd years plus. And I've seen business advice off her. We were really close with her, and I just thought, not Alison, Emma, and Burns. And I rang them.
What did she say?
I rang Anne Burns. I rang Anne Burns, and we had a few minute conversation. And put the phone down. But she, was like, hang on. Basically, I said, Anna, I've just come out of police station. And she was like, oh, what have you done? I went, nothing. What have I done? I've done nothing. I said, what's up?
I went, one of your granddaughters have made a complaint. And she asked me which one. I said, Ellie. And she goes, I'm at wit's end with my granddaughters. Oh, okay. And then when she said Mohammed, because normally I'm Rami or more, but then when soon as that was said, then I became Mohammed. I thought this isn't a friendly conversation. This is now turning into a formal conversation. So I'm thinking now, damn, have I breached my bail? Is she going to go to the police? Am I going to be now remanded or something? But luckily, thank God she didn't. And I just said, look, is the police involved? I went, yes. She goes, are they investigating? I went, yes. And she goes, you've got bailing conditions. I went, yes. She goes, well, Mohammed, I don't think me and you should be having this conversation. At that point, I just thought, fair enough, does make sense. But I just thought, to me, it didn't make sense. Why am I being put here? And I thought, there's some very harrowing accusations your granddaughter made. And she goes, look, Mohammed, we shouldn't be having this conversation. And that was it. And then we put the phone down. And after that, I've never spoke to Anne Burns. She left my Facebook about 6 months ago. We were Facebook friends till about 6 months ago. So it's been quite a challenging last 3.5, 4 years. Prior to that, 2 years that were already taking place. It's been like a 5-year, 6-year. We've been in this ordeal for over 6 years now as a family.
Horrific. Now, I want you to be very sensitive how we deal with this bit, but obviously in the days after your arrest, it had a huge impact on you, and you got so low that you attempted to take your life. I don't want you to give me details. We've got to be very aware, obviously, of the triggers, but I just want you to give me a sense of that impact that it had on you and just how low you got.
God, it was difficult already to the arrest, because 2 weeks prior to the arrest, my son, I had found him in this room. This is my son's room. Bathroom next door, using the bathroom. His lights are on, so knocked on, walks in, and when you see your 18-year-old son, all arms up to the same blade, that just, as a father, it kills you. I just shouted, Nicola, on top of the stairs. Quickly, she got towels wrapped around him, bandages. We did what we got him into hospital. So then I've been arrested. I've dealt with that. Then 2 weeks later, I've been arrested. Then 2 weeks later, I've attempted my own, because my son was like, I'm not staying here, Dad. We need to move. He was offloaded. That was more of my trigger point, was my children, my partner. Throw whatever you want at me, I can handle it. When it comes to me, partner, my children, I don't think I can handle it, because it's not fair. They shouldn't be tarnished. Nor should I be tarnished like this. But why should they be going through hell? They've just moved here. But sons from our previous marriage had moved into our lives, just come back into our lives after the distance and everything. And I was just like, son, I'm not running away. We're going to stand here. We're going to fight them till the end. We are not going to give in. And it's like, my life's ruined. And when they say stuff like that, it still upsets you. And so what do I do? And the only way I could see out was that point for something that just, I don't know what pushed me to that far. It just ruined everyone's lives. Because of me, my kids have come here, started off, and I've brought them into a hellhole. I just thought the only way I could make life better for them is taking myself away, which was very stupid of me at the time. Now with hindsight.
Mohammed, just wait there a minute. I just want to bring Dan back in. Dan, are you still there? Dan, listening to Mohammed's account there, and as a local in the community, this man had to go through torment, not just in relation to these false allegations by Williams, but he was suffering at the hands of clearly, racial abuse and an impact from a community. Is that something that exists within Barrow? Is it something that you've heard of previously?
I mean, you can obviously ask Mo about this as well, but I think Barrow is, some people describe it as quite an isolated community. It's at the end of a long peninsula, and it's a mainly white community as well. There's not a lot of diversity really there, so you can imagine how maybe something like this kind of makes sort of racial tensions fester. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously something that's maybe already, always been there a bit, but it was certainly magnified by this. And
you know now, but at the time, of course, you didn't know that Mo was going through all of this behind the scenes before the 2020 Facebook post, did you?
Yeah, I suppose, for as far as we could report, we couldn't say anything about anything that had gone on, and I think obviously it wasn't known completely to me until I talked to him after it all come out, just what he was going through, and just what all these men that had been sort of drawn into this had had to go through as a result of these claims.
And Mo, it wasn't just you pulled into this. There was another man, Jordan, and I think we've got a clip of Jordan outside of the court giving a statement in relation to the impact on him.
I'd like to say thank you to everyone for all the support that's been shown. I'd like to thank the police for all the work they've done. I don't think the sentence is long enough, in my opinion, for what she's done to us all. I don't think she has any remorse. I looked back a few times while the judge was speaking, and there was just no remorse shown, so I don't think there's any there. I've tried ending my life over it. I've had a bond with my son. I've not been able to leave the house. I've not been able to go to work, so it's just, now I know she's locked away for a bit longer, it's just a bit of a relief, but I wish it was longer a sentence. And I do think I'm going to move out of the area, and so I'm not in the same area as when she's released. I would love to know why this has happened and what's made her do this, and why me? Out of everyone, why me? I am taking action against the police, yes, because as bad as it is, I do blame them as much as Ellie, because there was evidence there that I didn't do anything wrong, and they still consisted on sending me to prison.
I want to come back to the claims, obviously, in relation to the police and what's happening now. But before I do that, I just want to go to the court, the trial itself. Mohammed, you obviously sat through, I don't know if you sat through every day. Dan, you were there as well. Let's just start with you, Mohammed. How difficult was that to listen to what was going on?
Well, to be honest with you, it felt like I was on trial myself when I was sat in them docks, being cross-questioned by the defence. It was, and the path they used was very undignifying, to be honest with you. They were trying to discredit me or bring up my past or bring up anything I've done. It doesn't make you a paedophile, doesn't make you a rapist, doesn't make you a groomer. It was horrible. But they investigated me through the inch of my life for no reason. Even though it was an invasion of my privacy, I just feel I'm kind of grateful in the sense that they investigated me so deeply to get to the results we did.
At what point was there a shift in attitude from the police? Because obviously when they first arrested you, they believed that you were responsible. Did you see kind of like a seismic shift in their attitude to going, actually, do you know what, we've got this wrong?
I think it was the moment they released me, because even in the questioning, they were like, you've been to these places. Yeah, basically, because everything. They did 2 searches on my house. They took my car. They took everything. And in the final questioning, I even turned around. I said, look, I said to him, I want times, specific times and dates. So if I've been doing this for so many years, I said, I've had 2 phones. Luckily, I had both of my devices for that years. I had one at home, and I had the one I was using from 2017. They arrested me 29. And the one before that, I had for about 4 years. So I had both of my devices, right, that could actually prove it. So I said, I want specific times, dates, and I've only had 2 numbers since that period of time. And I had cards. So I give them both to him. I give all the passcodes. I give them all my bank accounts and disclosure to my bank accounts. And I said, I want times and dates. Let's work with times and dates, and let me get me banks. Let me get me thingy. That would show, wouldn't it? That would show all my movement. You can cell site my phone. I want to know how. I asked them. I said, I want you to know. Go ask how do I contact her? If I'm arranging, facilitating all this, how have I done it? How do I do it? The police didn't say that. I told the police that. I felt like I felt like I was doing the police's job. I had a crime wall in my home.
So you end up being arrested. The allegations that Williams made were many, but did the police provide you with any independent evidence to support her allegations against you, or were you solely arrested on the basis of her allegations?
Solely on the allegations. No independent, no nothing, no. It was all, yeah, it was all just on her. There was nothing else backing it up. That's the scary part. So if the girls today can, I'm not saying don't take the problem. This is such a sensitive subject. We can't take it away from the real victims. There is real victims out there, and what this lady has done to her sisterhood, it's shocking, and how the family is portraying this, so pushing this agenda, and they're going to actually ruin it for real victims. We're going to be the most scary part of it, and for a genuine victim to come across and give evidence, it's difficult as it is. But for a liar to come forward and just say these words, and the police come guns blazing.
Let me just hang on there a minute. Let me just bring Dan back in. Dan, you sat through the court process. Mohammed talks in terms of him giving evidence and obviously feeling that he was under or on trial himself. And I'm sure that if I were to speak to the other individuals who'd also been put through the mill, they probably would feel the same. As someone covering it, what was it like?
Yeah, I mean, it was an extremely, intense trial to cover. There was such a wealth of evidence that they had to go through. It was really in, exhaustive detail. They went through phone messages, they went through CCTV, all that kind of thing. And obviously you had people like Mo who, Mo spent hours and hours in the witness box being questioned. And it was an extremely intense thing to witness. I suppose, for him, it must have, as he said, it must have been horrendous. So it was just an extremely intense experience to watch, really. Because, it was just an extremely complicated and sensitive thing to have to sort of wade through, really.
Did you get a sense that it was heading in one direction early on, or were you thinking, I'm not really sure which way this is going to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the breakdown of how the evidence was presented, there was approximately I think about 10 weeks of prosecution evidence, and then I think maybe about a week or two of defense evidence. So, the defense really, the prosecution rather, they really put forward, huge masses of evidence. So, after only a few weeks, they were starting to, be really disprovable lies. So I think probably a few weeks in, the jury would be thinking, I'm starting to not believe this woman. Which obviously is kind of what it came down to. Is she telling the truth? Is she reliable, or is she trying to fabricate things?
Jamil, we've got some questions from some people.
We even have a comment from Jasmine Bundy here on Facebook that says, the way this man was treated for so long is awful. I think he should be compensated. I also got a comment from LP on YouTube, a question for Mohammed that says, do you still have people who don't believe the courts? How do you deal with those people?
Good question. That how do you actually deal with them people? Yeah, I'm still getting that. I'm still getting people like that. But the way now we've decided, we're exonerated by the courts. We were exonerated a long time ago. But if there's that mentality that just wants to carry on pushing that agenda, we're not going to waste our life or let this negativity come into our life, because it's these people are. They've got nothing good in their own life, or they're not people that actually want to spend or have communities come together. This is my thing. I look into things. I research things. If I've been told this person said this about you, which certain podcaster is, I'll look right back into it. Then I'll find a link of somebody, because I'm well known. I'll find a link of somebody that I know from somewhere to them, and I'll find out everything about them. And then I'll look, and I'll make a rational decision. And it's like, there's no rationalizing with crazy. You can't rationalize with crazy. You can only rationalize with somebody that's brain and has common sense. And we've just made a decision. That minority will always carry on. Let them carry on. We're not going to let it ruin it. Any more of our life and our positive steps we're taking, and we're taking as a family and as a joint group and friends, the campaigns that we're setting up and what we're doing for the wrongly accused and for the real victims out there. We are now in the midst of that, and hopefully that's going to be the target. That's going to be our energy, and we're going to move forward with that. We're not going to let these negative people bring us down. You've brought us down enough. No more. Sorry, stop.
So what's next for you now, Mohammed? Obviously, we've got the situation of the campaigns that you're running, which is brilliant. Is there any recourse back to the police now?
Well, yes, there is. I think the local police to be, when the initial complaint like this has been made, I think there needs to be more of a thorough checklist. When the girl makes a complaint, I know it's difficult, but I would say if you're innocent and you're a girl that's been abused or raped or trafficked, groomed, it's like with this Eleanor Williams case. Why wouldn't you want to give your mobile phone up? Why do you deny swabs on the day, but then 4 days later come back, or a week later and come back and say, I want to give a swab? These things, I think, these checklists need to be put in, certain checklists need to be put in place. Firstly, surrendering of your devices is a must, because that cell sites, that puts locations into place, that puts everything categorically in place. If there's any messages and any conversations taking place, that shows there and then. It gives you more information. If you're delaying the matter, you're not getting proper evidence, are we? If we delay the matter, we don't get proper evidence. So this needs to be addressed in certain manner, where obviously the sensitivity of that is taken in consideration as well, because it is a serious accusation. But at the same time, how serious is this accusation? Is this really happened? And the police, especially the police women I dealt with, found out with my case, dealt with this more emotionally. They were more, it is true, must have happened, but I think they've got a kind of strict feminism, that point of it. I do understand it exists, but they've got to take them feelings apart. They've got to be more professional, and they've got to be more police than a woman. And that's the balance. I think that I kind of felt that I struggled with a couple of police ladies. The way they came in, it was just guns blazing. It wasn't, we're going to give him a chance. I'm a police officer and we should do. No, I'm a police officer. This lady made an accusation and we believe her. That's how I was received.
And in terms of the police's position, have they apologised to you?
Barrow Police have never apologised to me, no. And the gentleman from Penrith headquarters that dealt with all this weren't apologetic enough basically as soon as they realised how innocent I was.
Dan, let's just bring you back in a minute. Dan, the impact on the community now, the police's attitude, everybody, has it calmed down?
I think it probably has. It was obviously an extremely tense experience for the whole town to go through, and I think what everyone's sort of saying now, it needs to be a sort of period of healing, and whether that's gonna as it happened immediately after the trial, or whether it's going to take a number of years. I think that's the sort of the stage that we're at, really.
There's a clip I've got of the Simon Fell MP in the House of Commons, and he's talking about how people exploited the whole situation. I'm going to ask you, Mohammed, in a minute about Tommy Robinson, but let's just hear that clip from Simon Fell first.
Simon Fell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask the question of how widespread grooming activity is and how and where it links to child sexual exploitation and abuse cases. I also don't think it's unreasonable when people express a lack of faith in the system, as they have to me in conversations and in surgery appointments. There are clear examples of where the system hasn't worked and the victims being let down time and again. There's a clear appetite for more information and for faith to be restored in the process. I firmly believe that the only way we're going to get there is through transparency, through making the failings of the past visible and demonstrably learning our lessons from them. I want to concentrate the remainder of my time on different aspects of this debate, and that's around those with vested interests stirring up tensions to suit their own ends. This isn't to deny in any way the powerful and awful cases of CSE and CSA which exist and which must be stamped out whenever they occur. In Barrow, we've seen the sharp end of these vested interests. They take the vacuum of information that forms when investigations start or when court processes begin, and they exploit people's fears. They exploit their worst natures and they fill the void with misinformation and conjecture that serves no one but themselves.
So, Mohammed, obviously, Tommy Robinson made the trip during COVID to come up to Barrow-in-Furness. I think you've had some conversations with him since. I think he's actually appeared even on your podcast or a podcast with him. What's your relationship like with him now, and how did that all come about? I mean, presumably initially you were pretty angry with him.
Obviously, it's Tommy Robinson. I thought he was a racist. I thought he was Islamophobic. I even said to my partner, I said, wait till Tommy Robinson gets here. While all this was going on. And he basically, he turned up and I wasn't here. And he spoke to my partner and the kids. And then they rang me up, numbers were exchanged, long story short, basically, then I turned up. I sat down with him. Very cautious about him. I filmed him. He for them, basically, I think it was 1 hour, 40 minutes we were together originally before he left. Then he came back. For the first time in my life, I'm meeting him. And up to then, I was one of his trolls, you could say. Anything he put up, I would comment something. And he told me about his own experience as a father going out, and everybody knows he's called racist. He's called, he's been given, and he's always abused verbally, and his kids are now affected. And at that point, I got there's something here as well. You know what I mean? And we got on. We got on, and he was on my side. Even though he's Muslim Pakistani, he goes, I've got to say, the truth is the truth. He goes, I'm about getting the truth out. This is what people don't understand about me. I thought, okay, cool, fair enough. At that time, I can't even say I needed Tommy Robinson to say this. He did take a lot of heat away of the unhinged far right. You can say he does they do listen to him. They would listen to him more than they would actually listen to the courts or the police or me as the actual victim speaking out and saying this isn't true. But the people do listen to him. And, people would probably not like me to say this, but I do think he was a bit of a godsend at times as well. And our relationship has got cut because over the period, we've stayed in contact, and I've gone to him for advice because following these type of cases, he's invested time. He has knowledge, believe it or not, in these type of cases, and whether it was for people can say it's for an agenda or whether it's for him to just put his grift. I can't answer that because with me, I take everybody as face value, and he's done me a good turn. He was good. He was honest with me. He was right with me. He could have edited. He could have corrupt things. He could do anything he wanted to make me look like a monster. But he didn't. He did what he came out to set out to do, and that was get to the bottom. And a journalist, if he's a journalist, a lot of people don't accept him as a journalist, but he did a journalistic point of view. He came in without prejudice, and I think he did a good job as the whole Asian community. And I think the whole Asian community, when I talked to him in Barrow now about Tommy Robinson, I think we've persuaded that I know because I've spent some personal time with him, and I think the guy's very charming. He's a good company to all politics and aside. He seems to be a decent person.
Good. I think you did a very, very clever thing by not aligning with him, but communicating with him him and getting him to obviously talk. And as you say, what powerful voice to have in that campaign. I'm just going to draw this to a close. But before I do that, I just want to address one final issue, which I think is a really important issue. And Mohammed, you have addressed it or talked about it. That is that the judge at the very end, the judge says that the harm of this offending extends to undermining the public confidence in the criminal justice system. We are aware that sex trafficking of young females does occur. There is a risk that genuine victims will, as a result of this defendant's actions, feel deterred from reporting it. People may be less likely to believe their allegations. I am sure that these charges will be investigated. Such offences will do so in order to avoid any reluctance to investigate these cases. So the judge very clearly saying that the impact of Williams's allegations could cause serious impact on those genuine victims out there who want to come forward. Mohammed, you've been through what nobody should go through. You've not just through the torment of the 2019 allegations of Williams, but it sounds like you have been through an awful lot in your life. There are many people of ethnicity who will feel exactly the same pain that you've had to suffer. But let's draw this to the sum of it. This is an individual who was a fantasist, who made up allegations that impacted not just on you, but on other people's lives. But the damage that she has done is immeasurable. The damage that she has done to genuine victims out there. What would you say?
Well, all I say to genuine victims, you've got nothing to worry about. And please, please don't let this put you off. And be more honest, be thorough. If you feel that it's inconvenienced, it's like this is one of the conversations I had with the police recently, with the team that investigated it. And I said, the devices, this is the key stuff. You've got to work with the police and be honest about what actual has taken place in that horrible ordeal. Just be honest about it. And that's it. And hopefully, if you're honest, you get your justice. There's nothing to worry about. But if you're going to lie, then you're going to cause complications for yourselves and for your victims. But I think that's what we've got to understand. And I just feel now we're getting more liars becoming the claim culture. The compensation that is out and being handed out is not. It's extortionate amount of money that for somebody, and the support they get for making these lies up. I personally believe the compensation should not come so quickly. Compensation should follow later after a lot of counselling has been done as well. I think because it's a sensitive matter of rape. It's not something that you can just get. You be sentenced, you get a bit of money, and life's great. No, it isn't. It leaves trauma. PTSDs. It leaves scarring, effects to a female, and I think the government and the policing should be helping these people more towards counselling and healing these people before they're given sums of money.
Brilliant, Mohammed. I'll come back to you at the very end. Dan, just bring you back in here just to finish up. The Mail in South Cumbria did a brilliant job. You obviously followed the narrative as it unfolded. That caused you to come under flack, considerable flack, not just you, but your other reporters at the paper. And of course, that led to a demise from the community in reflecting and respecting the Mail. Where are you now? Has a lot of that been built back up again, or is there still, the after effects still being felt?
I think it probably has. Obviously, people were really shocked at stuff they were reporting in 2020, but as the truth was revealed, I suppose people I think started to come round, and people followed. We covered nearly every day of the trial, and people really followed that reporting. They really seemed to trust it, and they really seemed to be interested in in what was being put forward. So I think it probably has, yeah.
Well, thank you both. We've both entered, or you have both entered a world, sadly, of lies, and you've been at the heart of it. You know, Mohammed, in a way, your life was destroyed because you were accused, and Dan, your life was impacted upon because you covered that story. I think what it does is it tells us as a community, as a society, that perhaps values have changed. Perhaps when we look at something, we become so fixated on what we're told rather than perhaps looking for what the evidence is. You know, I think that Trump and the whole fake news has a big part to play. That the reality is out there is that we have to look further. And yes, of course, there are many, many victims out there of sexual abuse, and overwhelmingly, those people who go to police are victims. But there amongst them will be those people who are liars, who are the chancers, who are the fantasists like Williams. And what it is, it's incumbent upon the police to do that investigation properly, to make sure that all those avenues, all those elements of additional evidence are collected before you take the huge step, the momentous step of arresting somebody, impacting on their life. And I think, being a former detective myself, I think it's a responsibility for every police officer to think very carefully about when you're going to arrest somebody, because it might well be in your day-to-day work. That's what you do. But the impact is massive, not just in terms of the impact on the individual of being accused, but the fallout in a community, when a community goes on the hunt, becomes, fixated on a certain view, which they did for a considerable period of time in relation to Williams. They believed her account. And why wouldn't they? This was a young girl who was making an allegation. What it was, of course, was lies. And I hope that the police will reflect very carefully on the role that they played on this, to make sure that it doesn't happen again, to make sure that there aren't people out there who are falsely accused and whose life is turned upside down. And we're lucky that Mohammed is still here. We're lucky that there are other individuals who are accused are still here, because it could have been so very different. You've heard from them themselves in their own words of the impact that it's had on them. Mohammed, just a final word to you. I'm sorry that you went through this. And as a former detective, I think that police have a duty to make sure that when they do make those arrests, they are absolutely sure that all the evidence that can be collected has been collected, that they go through absolute due process and real collection of evidence, because they have to realize that as soon as someone's arrested, the impact and the fallout has been massive. Mohammed, I wish you well.
Yep.
What are the next steps for your recovery of this now?
Well, now it's because I was in a battle, in a sense you could say. I didn't realize how far it's actually affected me, because I'm too busy fighting every day. Every day was a fight for my innocence. And now you get the chance to sit back and you start processing it. It's a struggle. It is a struggle. I still don't go out on my own. I still don't. But every day, day by day, and day by day, life will be back. I know it.
Mohammed, you're a brilliant man. I wish you and your family well, and I hope that on your road to recovery and to get back into your day-to-day life, that it gets better on a day-to-day basis. And if I ever am in Barrow Furnace, I'll look you up, and I look forward to coming and having an ice cream with
Please
you.
do.
Dan, thank you so much for joining us as well. I wish you well in your continued career at South Cumbria Mail. I think you're bold. Any newspaper, any regional newspaper that takes on a big campaign like this and comes through the other side, is bold. It's hard, and I think sometimes you have to have that backbone. But that's what journalism's about, and I'm sure that you've learned an awful lot from covering this, not just in terms of the impact that it has on a community, but also the impact it has on you. So, Dan, I wish you well for the future.
Thanks.
Well, that was this week's NewsQuest Investigates. Two incredible individuals who have come together in a very different way. Dan Taylor from the Mail South Cumbria, who covered the story of a fantasist, Williams, who made up the fact that she'd been sexually abused, raped, and trafficked. So much so that her allegations were believed. They were believed by the police in Barrow-in-Furness. That led to the arrest of a number of individuals, including one man, Mohammed Ramzan, a local businessman who was accused of rape and trafficking. His life was turned upside down. It had an impact not just on him, but on his family, on his son. We've heard in relation to how bad that was for him, his wife, and his loved ones. But he's trying to put his life back together again. He's trying to build back up in a community that's been rocked by false allegations by an individual and by people who have then followed whatever narrative they've wanted to follow, whatever agenda they've wanted to follow. Yes, there are grooming gangs out there. Yes, there are Asian grooming gangs out there. But it is the responsibility of the police to make sure that you do your investigation thoroughly so that you don't cause the devastation that was caused as a result of a fantasist by Williams. Thankfully, she's now behind bars, sentenced to 8.5 years. And hopefully during that period of time, she will receive help. Undoubtedly, she has issues. I don't know what those issues are. Clearly, she has issues that caused her to make such false allegations that led to lives of individuals being changed. I apologize during the course of some of that podcast that we lost internet coverage, particularly in relation to some of Mohammed's coverage, and I hope it doesn't lower the impact of what he's talking about and become too annoying for you. Thank you. You can follow us tomorrow when we are interviewing another character. This man is a man who has now become quite well known. He's got almost 1 million followers on his social media platforms. Sean Atwood, a colourful past, a man who was a drug dealer turned now into a campaigner, a man who visits schools and gives talks at schools. He's with me tomorrow at 12:30. So please come back, follow us tomorrow, and we'll do a good Q&A session as well, so you can ask specific questions of him. I've been on his show a number of times now, talking about Jimmy Savile and talking about Madeleine McCann, but now the tide has turned. It's now for me to ask him questions and for me to get answers from him. So thank you. Thank you for joining us again on NewsQuest Investigates. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Please join our many followers on subscription, and you can not just follow our podcast, but all the other material and all the other content that we upload, the cases that we follow, and we'd love to hear from you. If you've got something that you want us to follow, or you've just simply got a comment that you want to talk to us about or tell us about, drop us a line. Thank you very much and good day.